Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome to a Downing Street special edition of Encounters. Today we're going to be speaking to a delegation of National Union of Journalists officials who will be visiting Downing Street and presenting them with a letter that was passed via a motion that was unanimously passed by the Conference of the National Union of Journalists a couple of months ago. Part of this delegation and the people we'll be speaking to is Adam Smith, who's the Joint President of the National Union of Journalists, John McDonnell MP for Hayes and Harlington, who happens to be the Secretary of the National Union of Journalists Parliamentary Group. Also will be Parvinder Singh, who's a journalist. He's the author of a book called Crystal Nacht, The Sikhs' Crystal Nacht, 1984. And Phil Miller, the man who famously found the documents early in this year in January, which implicated the British in Operation Blue Star in the planning and advisory roles. And at the moment, we don't know what else that the British are implicated in with regard to 1984. Also, other members of the delegation include Francis Rafferty, Michael Calderbank, and Tan Manjit Singh Desi, who's a prospective Labour MP in next year's coming elections. Without further ado, we're going to go to Downing Street now, where they're handing in a letter to the Secretary at 10 Downing Street for David Cameron for his attention and for him to then further act upon what it is that's demanded in that letter. So let's go and see the footage from 10 Downing Street. Okay, welcome back. We're going to speak to a couple of members of the delegation and just get a basic idea of what they think and what their ideas are. If I can, Andy, hello, welcome to the show. I'd like to ask you, Andy Smith, being the Joint President of the National Union of Journalists, what do you hope to achieve by this letter? And what I mean by that is, do you think it will be effective and do you think it will be listened to and actioned upon?
Okay. Hello. Well, obviously what we are backing is a call for a judge-led independent inquiry. Whether these things are effective is a matter of small degrees that we find with this type of drip feed release of information, that unless you ask the questions, you don't get the answers, and that by continuing to pressure the government, we hope to uncover more than the original inquiry divulged. Okay,
do you plan to follow this up with any other further motions or any further pressure as far as the National Union of Journalists is concerned? What further steps can be taken to ask or demand that these recommendations in the motion itself are met?
Right. The motion, as you say, was debated at our delegate conference and has, being passed, become policy of the Union to continue to press on the issue. Where we take it from here will obviously depend on the results of the letter and what further revelations we can get out of the government. We are very much in the hands of our members in terms of what action they want us to take as a union.
Okay, John McDonnell, welcome to Encounters. You're a familiar face to Sikh activists and fighters of freedom around the world, really, with your work for various self-determination attempts by various nations. With the Sikhs in particular, you have a common bond, and you've worked with us for Professor Pullar and various other campaigns that have been attempted over the years, but not really known in the Sikh world for your association as Secretary of the National Union of Journalists Parliamentary Group. So with that in mind, John McDonnell, this is a different approach from the Sikhs especially. What do you think, and what are your aspirations towards this motion? Does it have a chance of getting through to Downing Street, which is pretty impregnable at the moment, to anything that the Sikhs are attempting to do by way of attempting to get justice or even full disclosure or even the truth about the events of 1984?
Okay, my view is that we've got to try everything we possibly can now to try and secure the truth about what happened at Amritsar. The government, the UK government's involvement with the Indian government, both in terms of the massacre at the Golden Temple, but also what happened in terms of the human rights abuses and, yes, unfortunately, the tragic loss of life in the Punjab through Operation Blue Star. Now, I've already tabled an early day motion in Parliament today because we're now at the 30th anniversary of the massacre, calling for a full and independent inquiry. We're trying to use every angle we possibly can. So I'm Secretary of the NUJ, the National Union of Journalists group in Parliament, and the National Union of Journalists now have taken up this campaign. So it's another way of exerting pressure. And it's another group now that has joined the alliance seeking the truth about what happened in the Punjab at that stage. We will not gain the truth until there's the full publication of all the documents relating to the dialogue between the UK and the Indian government at that time, and what advice was given, particularly what military advice was given by the UK government to the Indian government. One of the ways in which we'll find that truth is the publication of the documents, and then journalists then being able to write their stories and go through an analytical approach to what happened. In that way, we'll discover what happened, and it'll be open and transparent for the whole world to see.
Today we're at 10 Downing Street. We've been joined by Phil Miller, the researcher who uncovered many of the revelations which obviously we're all trying to grapple with regards to 1984. A lot of good work has been done since then by the National Union of Journalists, and it's an honour to have joined them today while we're presenting to the Prime Minister requesting for a full independent public inquiry into 1984 and the extent of the British government's involvement, the government of 1984, the Thatcher government of the time. So now we're hoping that the Prime Minister will look upon this request and order a full independent public inquiry on the issue, and I'm very, very hopeful with regards to that. And ਇਸ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸੰਗਤ ਟੀਵੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਦਰਸ਼ਕ ਨੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਮੈਂ ਇਹ ਦੱਸਣਾ ਚਾਹਾਂਗਾ ਕਿ ਅੱਜ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਮੁਹਿੰਮ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸਿੱਖ ਕੌਮ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਿੱਖ ਜਥੇਬੰਦੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਵੀ ਚਾਲੂ ਰੱਖੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਆਪਾਂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪੂਰਾ ਦਬਾਅ ਪਾਉਣਾ ਹੈ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਤੇ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਨਿਰਪੱਖ ਅਤੇ ਪੂਰੀ ਜਾਂਚ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈ 84 ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਦਸਤਾਵੇਜ਼ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਵੀ ਉਹ ਪੂਰਾ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਦੱਸਣ ਕਿ ਜੋ 84 ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜੋ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਥੈਚਰ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਸੀ ਉਸ ਸਮੇਂ ਦੀ ਵੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਸ ਹੱਦ ਤੱਕ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਦੀ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਲਾਹ ਮਸ਼ਵਰਾ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਅਤੇ ਸਾਡਾ ਇਹੀ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਬੇਨਤੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਅੱਜ ਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਯੂਨੀਅਨ ਆਫ ਜਰਨਲਿਸਟ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇਕੱਠੇ ਹੋਏ ਨੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਤਾਂ ਦਾਸ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਮੌਕਾ ਮਿਲਿਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਸਾਥ ਦੇਣ ਦਾ ਕਿ ਆਪਾਂ ਸਾਰੇ ਰਲ ਮਿਲ ਕੇ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਤੇ ਇਵੇਂ ਹੀ ਦਬਾਅ ਪਾਈ ਰੱਖੀਏ।
Now we're going to speak to Parvinder Singh and Phil Miller. Welcome to Encounters, Parvinder and Phil. Basically, you've successfully delivered the letter. Parvinder, you were one of the people that put this motion to the conference, the full conference, 1,300 members of the National Union of Journalists. It was passed unanimously. It was a welcome development amongst academic Sikhs who understand that the need for the wider community outside of just the Sikh community itself to establish facts, and by forcing a government to come clean and help us establish those facts. Baji, what do you think is now achievable, and what do you think is required now to maintain the pressure other than what you've done yourself?
Yeah, as you say, Baji, the National Union of Journalists as you say, Paji, the National Union of Journalists passed a resolution back in April calling for an independent judge-led inquiry into all the papers, the UK papers covering the whole of 1984. And that's why we're here today, handing this letter to David Cameron, calling for that and also calling for full disclosure, because we were led to believe that we would get full disclosure and transparency in the events of 1984 and in relation to the Indo-UK relationships that were built during that year. And the breadth of feeling now amongst the Sikh community, and you saw that on the very large demonstration on Sunday. The feeling is that the truth hasn't come out, and we're only asking for transparency and full disclosure, and that's the reason why we are here. And more importantly, and that's one work that I tend to do outside the Sikh community, and I think a lot of us should start doing that, is to try and get the message out to non-Sikhs and to make those links with trade unions, political parties, community groups, and get them to know what really happened in 1984 and the reason why the community is now united in asking for full disclosure. And I urge all Sikhs and all organisations to support the NUJ letter in this demand. Thank you.
Phil, are you at the moment still looking for documents at Kew Gardens? If so, have you found anything? And if not, do you think that there's a possibility that files are now beginning to be removed as the 30th year continues and further documents are placed at Kew Gardens for public access? Do you think there's a danger that documents are now being removed before they get to Kew Gardens and the National Archives?
So I've been looking for more documents, not just about Punjab, but other parts of the world as well, where Britain has used covert actions towards very dubious ends, such as in Uganda, and still looking at Sri Lanka as well. I think in August this year there should be another batch of documents released to the National Archives, and we should all look at those very closely and see if there's anything new there. Of course, there's a chance with documents might have been tampered with or otherwise removed. The British government, the British state, has quite a illustrious track record of doing that type of thing. So we just have to see what we can find and keep looking, pursuing other avenues as well, not just at the archives, but perhaps other ways of finding documents or talking to people who were involved at that time, and just see what we can find.
Parvinder and Phil, if there's anything that you think that I haven't addressed today with regard to the process you've just engaged in, which is the beginning of a process, if there's anything you'd like to tell the Sangat that you think would be pertinent for them to know at this point, feel free to tell us.
Yes, and finally, I urge all Sikhs and all Sikh organisations to support the National Union of Journalists letter in calling for an independent, judge-led inquiry into all the papers concerning 1984 throughout the year. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that, Baji. I appreciate that. I'd like to also say on behalf of Encounters, thank you for allowing us to be part of the delegation today. That is all that remains to be said. To be fair, we appreciate you've watched Encounters today. We've brought you information about further steps that are being taken, the pressure that's being applied to 10 Downing Street, not only from the National Union of Journalists, but from the Sangat at large. We've had 60,000 people in London this week. We've had New York, we've had San Francisco. The Sangat is not going to forget what happened 30 years ago. It has no intention of forgetting what happened 30 years ago. And anybody that assumes that it will sooner or later fade from memory may as well think again. This is not going to fade from memory. Justice is demanded. Justice will be achieved. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.